Okay, so I'm just going to run you through a little bit more with families, looking still at curtain panels, and but also just how you can manage your files, maybe just make sure you know all the options there. So just want to make sure you know about this option here for switching between your windows, because you have the button there on your toolbar to switch between windows, which in Revit can be a bit unwieldy if you have a lot of windows open from one file. So by clicking on that button, you can see all the windows I've got open, and if you go to the View tab, you can go to these different options, for example, Tile, Cascade, and so on, and again that's going to show you all the windows. And so like I said, that can be a bit complicated if you have lots of windows open. But if you go to the, again, Quick Access Toolbar, you can see the button next to that Switch Windows button, which you also have here on the View tab, is Close Hidden. So that's going to close all the windows except one. And then, if you look at Switch Windows again, either here on the View tab or back up on the Quick Access Toolbar, you're only going to see one window from each file, which can make it much easier to navigate between your files. So I have another file open where I have the curtain wall panels that I want to give to you. So I'm going to just select one of those using Tab and then go to Edit Family. And this is a really good way of extracting families from any project file actually, because often you won't have the original family file, but you'll have a project that might have lots of families in it that you want to use. And so you can just select them, click Edit Family, and that will actually create a family file for you, if there isn't one already there. So now it's made this file with the name of the family, Panel Tilt Solid. So I can go to the menu, Save As, Family, and I'm going to save this into the Revit library on the P drive. Oh, sorry, that's on the U drive. Yeah, P drive. And I've got a shortcut, of course, but I'll just browse to it to remind you where it is. I'm sure you all know, but just in case. Okay, so here, and I'm going to save it into Curtain Panels, where I've got a few other families already saved. And then that way you can get to it. And also I can there just use Load into Project and choose the other file I'm working in, click OK. And now to place that, I can then just select any panel here using Tab, go to Edit Type, or sorry, I don't even need to go to Edit Type, just click on the drop down list there in Properties, and I can choose Panel Tilt Solid. That easy. If you want to change the angle of those louvers, I've set that up as an instance property, which means you don't need to choose Edit Type to change the angle. You can just change the angle in Properties here. So that's 80 degrees, which is sloping just a little bit. If I make it 20 degrees, that's going to open it out more, so it's closer to horizontal. So unlike the one I showed you before, where the angle doesn't do anything, it's got an angle property, but it won't actually make any change. This one will change. And so I'll go and get the glass one the same way. So back to the file where I have all my families, project file, Tab, and I'll get one that's got a different angle actually, so I'm just going to select this one. And again, Edit Family to create a family file. And then it's good to look at then how that's been created, because it's got the louvers there as a collection. And so the way I've done this family... Yeah, sure.
Could you space them out? How could we delete?
Yeah, well, you've got to have a look at how it's been done. So I'll show you. It's done with actually an even spacing, and I've got the louver size there. So if you want to try making the spacing adjustable, then you'll have to look at setting up some more parameters. You basically, the method is you draw some reference planes that you can then, so you draw a reference plane, and then you can use the array tool to get copies of those, or you can do an array of the original object actually. So that's the first step, because I think actually, you remember with reference plane, will let you do an array? Yeah, it should, yeah. So you can do an array. Yeah, either method will work, but maybe doing an array with the base object, so the way I've set it up, that should work pretty well. So by doing an array, you can then assign a parameter for the count of the array. So you can have an adjustable number of louvers, and then you need to assign a parameter for the spacing of the louvers and use a formula so that when the total distance changes, your count changes. So you've got to do a little bit of, it's not quite programming, but you're typing in some formulas in the parameters. And I'll show you that later. You can do it, but I haven't set that up in this one. This one's just a certain height. So if you find that you need a different height panel, the easiest way to change that, instead of going through that whole process of setting it up so that it's adjustable using parameters, you can just come into this family and copy the louvers, and there you've got this top reference plane that's basically setting the size of the panel, and you can just move that to suit the size of the panel you're working on, and then manually just copy the louvers to the locations you need them to be, and save it as a new family with a new name, load it back in, and just use that as one of your panels. But yeah, if you find yourself working on a big building where you've got 10 different heights of panels with louvers, then it might be worth setting up a parameter to make them adjustable. So, yeah, see what makes sense. But the other thing I wanted to show you here, and this is really what makes it all work, these louvers are a family as well. So it wouldn't work otherwise. If you tried to just model the louver object in the same file as the curtain panel family, you wouldn't be able to make it adjustable. The angle wouldn't work. It would fall apart. Because if you try to rotate a solid in a different plane, from the side particularly, it's very difficult to have that rotation in an elevation plane at the same time as you're changing the height and doing other things and changing the width. Revit just won't cope with it. And so the way that the program's been designed is that you have parameters that can be linked from one file to another. And so this louver here, again, it's a family. So it has its own parameters, and one of them is the angle, so the tilt of the louver. Another one is the width. And so those properties are now adjustable in this family file. And that's the way, if you find that you want complex parameters, and especially when you have repeated objects, try to use families, separate families for each of those. So any type, basically the rule of thumb is anything that's duplicated. So in a desk, for example, you might have 4 legs. So each of those legs should be done with the one family that's then nested into the desk family. So we'll go further with that as you work through your project, but hopefully that'll give you some ideas about how you can work with your own families. So just like before though, I'll save this one so you can get to it in the same folder, and so this is going to be panel tilt glass. You can change the material to anything you want, but it's glass at the moment, and I'm going to load that into the same file so you can see it in action. And so I'm going to replace the one I had before. Oh, geez, that's it. And again, now if I change the angle, it will definitely work. So the main difference between these two families is that the glass one tilts from the centre of the louver. The solid one that I've made to be metal tilts from the edge. Otherwise, they're quite similar. But that's the way those different types of louvers tend to work. And so then if you have a look at some real examples of curtain walls using louvers, you can do lots of interesting things. It goes right back to... Oh, sorry, that's a bad example. But you can do lots of interesting things just by changing the pattern of the panels that have louvers or something other than glass? Oh, yeah. Yeah. This one? Yeah, for that you'd need to use a curtain system. So you'd have to make a massing family and create that surface, and then you could try to make a curtain system. Even then, I think whoever's going to struggle to make that with a curtain system or any sort of curtain wall. So you could model it. You could, I mean, that, even though it looks like an organic form with lots of curves, it's actually made up of a series of profiles that have a curve in them, but they're basically just flat surfaces. So worst case, you could just model each of those as an extrusion. And I've actually done designs like that, much smaller, but I have done something very similar to that and built it. And it was done with plywood. It was for an interior, but basically got a curving, organic form made out of lots of flat sheets of plywood, just cut with different profiles that changed gradually. And you'll see that that's quite common with interiors. I'll show you some examples later. If you look at the earliest curtain walls, they often had a similar idea. So that's a very early one. So that's the here we go, Bauhaus, which is sometimes thought to be the first curtain wall, but it's not. But it's one of the first glass facades done that way. So anyhow, just maybe think about what you can do with your the pattern of your openings and make the facades more interesting by varying those. You can do similar things with windows, of course, and then look at using curtain systems for sun shading. So here you can see I've turned that massing that I've done earlier into a curtain system there. And then the only problem now is that the joins on my mullions are overlapping, so I can just take out one of the mullions and then even try a corner mullion to get a better join. So, well, the clog mullion there isn't joining so well, so maybe the trapezoid mullion would be better, but I'd have to play with the settings there to get that right, but that probably would work in the end. For now, though, I think I'll just go for the quad. So if you had a look at the way you join mullions, I think I showed you a little bit on the ground floor, didn't I? So with the... just want to make sure I've done that. So the corner mullions there, did I show you how you can do basic corners with curtain walls? No, that might have been with another class then. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you that, just finish off with curtain walls. So a lot of people with curtain walls, let's get my underlay out of there, have this problem with the joins, where the joins don't appear correct at the corners. So I've done my own curtain wall type, which I showed you earlier, so it's called Facade Wall 2. And so I'll just undo that. So let's just change that again. Or it's Facade Wall 1, so which one was it? Yeah, Facade Wall 2. Oh, you're here, and then delete mullions. There we go. Okay, so if you're used to using storefront all the time, then you would see at the corner you'd have mullions because they're set in the border type. So here for border type 1, I'll just go and set something like you would have with storefront, where you get those mullions automatically on the corners. Just go to thin line so you can see it a bit better. And it looks all wrong, and you think, well, that's because the curtain wall isn't behaving, and it's kind of right, but it's really because it's not got the right mullion there. So I'm going to go back, and so what I'll often do when I set up my own curtain wall types is not even worry about setting a border type, because usually I find you've got to go and put the border mullions in manually anyway. So you can put them in if you like. It's handy when you have, I'll just show you if you do put them in. the only time it's useful is if you've got a curtain wall with an end that's open. So if I draw a curtain wall here that's not connected to anything, it's handy to have that mullion at the end. But when they join at a corner, you're going to get those mullions that you don't need. So, like I said, normally you just have to go and manually do those corner mullions. So I'm going to select one of them, unpin it, and then delete it. And then select the other one, unpin it as well, but then set it instead to the corner mullion. And that will make it join correctly. So that mullion's big because it's just set up that way initially. I've made my mullions here smaller, so I've just got 30 by 80. So I can select this mullion now and go to Edit Type. It's Quad Mullion 1, so I'll just go to Duplicate, and I'm going to make it Quad Mullion 80. And then go down and set the depth in each direction to 80. Just so it's a bit smaller. So that's how you corner your mullions, sorry, curtain walls to join at the corners using mullions. If you don't want mullions between your, say, your glass panels, do you know how you join the glass if you don't have mullions? You can do it. So there are a couple of options. You can either do mechanical systems that have suspended glass, but if you've got a frame at the top and the bottom, so you just have a top plate at the top and bottom, that can be recessed, and then you can just have silicon joints in between the glass. So, and that gives the appearance of frameless. But the problem then with a curtain wall is that if we delete this, you'll have a gap there where they join at the corner. So you've got a couple of options. You can either just go, right click on the grip, disallow join, and then you can drag the walls closer together. It's a bit messy, but it works. Otherwise, the reason you have a gap is because the glass has this offset value. If you make that 0, the glass is 15 mil thick, so if I make that half of that, so 7.5, then the corners are going to touch. That's right, exactly, because in real life they would be flat panels of glass, and then you need a silicon joint in there to fill that corner in. You can get big sheets of glass these days. You can go up to 6 metres, but even so, they're going to be squared off at the end. The frameless looks fairly popular these days, but I think it doesn't hurt to have mullions, and they can still be a nice part of your design. So have a look at that, and then you can try and get the the mullions resolved. This here shouldn't be coming through. I'll show you now that. It'll just be attached. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so you can do it in 3D, of course, and sometimes it's better to do these things in 3D because in plan you won't see all of the mullions. I'm just going to hide these trees. So there, I better check the other end actually, just so you can see what I mean. So I did the mullion in plan, the corner mullion, but the mullions that I couldn't see in plan weren't done. So I'd need to go and in 3D adjust those anyway. So I can, again, just select it there, unpin, delete, and then select the other one, unpin, and then change it to the quad mullion I've just made. It's that easy. So that's why you find you probably do a lot of this work in 3D. Oops. So, and again, because they're type driven, in other words, I've done it in edit type, I have to unpin. If I hadn't put them in there, in the type properties, then of course they wouldn't be pinned, which would make it a bit less work. It doesn't take long to just choose them and then unpin them and change them. And so then, oh yeah, finally you can see these grids don't line up, but you can use a line in 3D to line up things like grid lines as well. So I should be able to find the grid here with any luck. It might not let me select it because it's perpendicular to the one I've selected. So I'd have to put in a reference plane in elevation, or probably even easier, well, if you just select it, you can find out the dimension, and then this one's type driven. I know the other one should be as well, but I might have a different wall type there. So what have I done? Oh yeah, because that one's still storefront, that's why. There we go. But you can, of course, adjust the mullions manually. But you sort of look at the joins and things like that, because that's all going to show in your elevations. So even for your schematic drawings, you just want to tidy those things up. And so for your schematic design submission, you need to do the elevations. And so you want to have a look at the windows and the curtain walls and all those things that you can see there. And then I'll go through some options for the graphics for those after lunch. And so and we've got to just do a couple of other things to finish off, like I said, sharps and things like that. But mainly I want to focus on the graphics. So don't know if I've shown you any of this. I'm going to do it after lunch mostly. But have you seen how when you go into graphic display options, you've got all these options to adjust your views? You can do some amazing things with this. So lighting and exposure will let you do some really interesting things, even just with shaded views. But particularly, shaded and realistic. So without rendering, you can have lighting showing, even interior lights that aren't rendered, and do some really interesting things graphically. And shadows, you can control the shadows in some interesting ways, and do a lot of things that you might think you need to use Photoshop for. Just shadow and Revit, and it's all set up for you. Backgrounds as well, so lots of interesting things you can do there. Yeah, we'll look at that after the break.